I recently completed Inferno, FTB's newest pack for Minecraft 1.18. I achieved every quest in the book and beat the final boss in just over 214 hours. These are just a few of my thoughts after playing through Inferno. The first thing to know about Inferno is that it's primarily a pack you play in the nether dimension. Your main objective is to make it back to the overworld via the end, and defeat the final boss, the Witherstorm. Inferno will have you looting dungeons, summoning boss mobs, traversing dimensions, operating magical apparatus, building your very own mine colony, automating machinery, and much more. As you can imagine, the beginning of the pack is very unique as you spawn above the bedrock on top of the nether. Without stone, you must craft a flint pickaxe, which you can obtain from the flint blocks scattered around the bedrock. You also spawn next to a custom structure featuring an EvoCraft weather accumulator, which you'll need later on for progression. A great food source early on is the cooked mushrooms, which you can cook on the campfire you start with, and find in the structure you spawn next to. The nether also features some new biomes, all of which look incredible, especially with the shaders. The shaders are shipped with the pack. I chose to play with them, but you can safely disable them if you prefer to play without. It's worth mentioning early on here that Inferno features a very customized and specific progression route, so if you prefer a more open pack where you're free to just play with the mods, then this pack might not be for you. However, I will say Inferno does make progression very rewarding. To give you an overview, the pack's primary progression is tied to the Minecolonies University building tier. Minecolonies is essential to progression, and many recipes are gated behind certain tiers of professions and technology research. To upgrade the university, there are different key items which are available from the primary bosses of the pack. All of these you can summon using a craftable boss summoning portal. The Bellringer for tier 2, Dame Fortuna for tier 3, Swampjaw to unlock tier 4, and the Voidworm and Witherstorm will allow the 5th and final tier of upgrades. These bosses will definitely give you a challenge, so make sure you're prepared to battle before you attempt these fights. Fortunately, there are many options for you when it comes to obtaining tools, equipment, and armor. The Minecolonies is an interactive building mod that allows you to construct your own town, which sounds really awesome and is one of the main things that initially had me interested in the pack. I was quite intrigued by it as it's something I've never played with before. Going into Inferno, I had huge ambitions for the town, however I quickly found that I much prefer creating my own spaces and spent most of the time building my own base underneath the colony. I only really used it for the professions, such as the enchanter, blacksmith, or mechanic. Every profession has some exclusive items tied to their tier and building type. The most important building is the university, which has a customized research and technology tree. Inside the main technology unlocks, you have 5 stages of the main progression line. These give you different game stages and are used as the main measure of progress, but there are some really nice tech unlocks such as miners efficiency, citizen movement speed, minimum stocking limits, recipe capacity, and citizen stat buffs. Minecolonies is a mod that you'll need to very heavily invest in, but it's made easier with the use of the Inferno capsules. You can obtain these via quest reward, and also they drop as some mob loot, but the capsules allow you to instantly build pre-planned Minecolonies buildings, simplifying the early part of getting the colony started. It also allows for easy expansion, but the capsules are only available for select buildings. The others you must have your colony's designated builders construct for you. I really like the addition of the capsules. I think it only serves to benefit the player and is a very nice feature in Inferno. I found that the colony demands a lot of micromanagement from the player, as the builders need materials in order to construct and upgrade the buildings that you want to add. Some of these materials you can automate and use systems like entangled blocks and lasers to stock control the warehouse. The warehouse being the primary item storage building for the colony. Nevertheless, I found that not everything was actually worth automating. For example, sometimes the builders would only require a few blocks of concrete of varying colours, or a flower or a trapdoor, a sapling, a cauldron, etc. Some of which you can have your citizens with professions craft for you. However, by the time you're able to do all of that, there really isn't any need for it, since you've already made most of the upgrades you require around your colony. Lots of the common materials you can get in large quantities from quest rewards, which is nice. But you need higher tiers of buildings to allow for more recipe slots within each profession. But to upgrade the buildings, you need to first provide the materials manually. So I felt a more worthwhile way to approach it was just to give them an amount of everything they needed often, and focus on other things. As such, I felt quite unmotivated actually to develop the Minecolony further. I'm honestly not sure if there is a solution here in Inferno, or if it's a problem inherent to the mod itself. Maybe if you were playing Minecolonies in a kitchen sink pack, it may have felt more rewarding, where your focus was on building something awesome, rather than trying to progress through an expert mod pack. It also could just be a preference thing, since you need to follow specific building schematics, and there's little room for user customization when it comes to the aesthetic of your town. Although thinking back to my playthrough, there's quite a lot of room for improvement, I feel. A few solutions I could potentially see working here is to increase the minimum recipe slots for each profession by default. This would effectively mean that you don't need to supply as many materials manually, and should allow you to automate the process much faster. Another suggestion could be to have the colonists be able to collect items from something other than their own buildings or the warehouse stock. Although this could potentially be more of a technical limitation with the mod itself. I'm not sure this is something that could be implemented in Inferno. One thing I did enjoy about the Minecolonies though was having to go to the stonemason, for example, to learn the recipe for the end portal frames. Fortunately for recipes like these, you can craft them yourselves after you learn it once from your citizens. Having your citizens craft progression items is the main reason you need your colony, and most of the recipes like these have minimum tier requirements also. But there are lots of different things you can do with your colony, some of which I never got around to. It can include things like farmers to harvest crops, farm passive animals, craft building blocks, mine ores, enchant items, brew potions, and much more. Most of these tasks are quite restricted in the way that you're required to set them up though. You must follow the schematic set out by the mod, which is most of the reason I prefer building my own automations. Overall, honestly, Minecolonies isn't really my type of playstyle. That is where most of my criticism lies though with the pack. Almost everything else about Inferno I really enjoyed. Magic mods are heavily featured in Inferno, and you'll find Evocraft, Blood Magic, Occultism, Nature's Aura, Ars Nouveau, Hexerai, and Apotheosis. There's probably a few more I missed as well. These mods have well written chapters in the questbook. The questbook I feel for the most part does a great job at guiding you through the main areas for progression, highlighting some nice features in certain mods, and interesting things to keep in mind while you're playing. This is exactly the role I think a questbook should play in a pack like this. Ars Nouveau, Blood Magic, and Occultism all have a few items which you need for progression. However, it's definitely possible that if you choose, you don't need to automate things fully. You don't need items here on the type of scale that you would, for example, in a pack like Divine Journey 2. I chose to automate a few of them and left others as just manual processes. However, I did make sure to make it look nice. I think Inferno turned out to be one of my favourite bases in my collection so far. I think it helps with your own commitment to the world if you enjoy spending time in the base. There are of course lots of optional quality of life things which you may want to consider from magic mods, like the Ars Nouveau spellbook, a extremely versatile option for combat and utility spells. Blood Magic has the sigils, which are also very useful. There's also things like the Nature's Aura Ring of Last Chance, Occultism Familiars, and quite a few other useful combat trinkets. Blood Magic is quite a large chapter in the book, and I enjoyed playing through it and checking out the new dimension in the mod. The Endless Realm contains a lot of nice loot, such as Demonic Will, Apotheosis Gems, Enchanted Gear, and Demonite. You will need Demonite for the first few pieces of Iridium, the Evocraft Spirit Furnace if you choose to build it, and the Tier 5 Blood Altar. One of the first big progression steps related to magic is the unlock of Nature's Aura ingots using Altar Infusion. This can allow you to summon zombie villagers, which you can cure to be able to trade with villagers. Entity summoning is used quite a lot in Inferno and features a lot of custom recipes. These allow you to summon mobs which would otherwise be unobtainable in the nether, such as cows and chickens. The summoning altar is also how you obtain the first bees and summon the Witherstorm. The bees play a major role in resource generation within Inferno, and I decided to very heavily invest in them early on, which turned out to be a good decision. Productive Bees is a vanilla style mod which allows you to create different bees that will produce material combs. These combs you can centrifuge into many different items, ingots, dust, gems, and blocks. It's an excellent way to generate a lot of your resources throughout the pack. I did really enjoy playing through Productive Bees. It's a very simple mod to understand and is always fun to play through. I do recommend that you automate bees as soon as you can, as they're a passive and zero maintenance way to generate resources, if you have them set up right. It's also, I think, one of my favourite areas aesthetically in the base. I really like the way these guys turned out. There were also some nice mod integrations within Inferno, such as the 2 Blood Bees, which can generate Blood Magic Life Essence and Evocraft Blood, as well as the Flux and Silicon Bees for applied energistics. Technology and automation. It's quite unique in Inferno as you're limited to your options for power generation, and as such the viability of some machines. Your options early on are pretty pipes and storage drawers, but the real automation begins after you unlock the Tier 3 Mechanics Hut. This is where you can get applied energistics. Obviously, to run an applied energistics system to allow you to digitally store and craft items, you need RF. At this stage of the game, it's most easily generated using vibration chambers, which can use any burnable fuel to generate minimal amounts of RF. I opted to use bonsais to generate wood and piped that through an entangled block system to feed vibration chambers, and those were used to get the first AE controller set up. One very unique aspect of Inferno is that applied energistic storage drives are disabled. So the only way to store items digitally is to use a storage bus on an external storage inventory. You could use something like a drawer network or the occultism dimensional storage. I didn't really feel like this added much to the game, but I also didn't think it was much of a challenge either. Placing a storage bus on an external storage to achieve the same effect as storage drives didn't really change much of the game. I almost feel it was an unnecessary change, but I guess it did force me to craft occultism storage, which I probably wouldn't have done otherwise, at least until I was cleaning up the quest book at the end of the pack. AE2 also has increased channel capacity, which was a really nice change I think for this type of pack. In terms of tech, the pack also has immersive engineering, which allows you to make machines like the wire mill and engineer's workbench. The workbench is how you make your AE2 processors. They're too slow though, please speed them up. Another mod we haven't mentioned yet in Inferno is Create. Create seems to be everywhere at the moment, but I do like Create. It's used quite heavily and is also the late game power generation method. The steam engines from Create are used to generate rotational force, which you can run through an alternator to create RF. Scaling this process is how you power most machines and build the more expensive multi-blocks, as well as being able to have the power headroom to be able to implement things like autocrafting for AE2. The final endgame mod is FTB Industrial Contraptions, a tech mod inspired by IC2. Instead of RF, these machines run on zaps, and while there is a way to convert RF into zaps using a transformer, you will also want to set up a nuclear reactor, as the other power generation methods are disabled here in Inferno. Mostly you'll need the power to create antimatter, which you need for infinity ingots. It's the second time I've used FTBIC and I enjoyed it just as much as the first time. It gives you some options for making plating, rather than having to use the mechanical press, and is also utilised for making the material used in singularities. Once you've cured your first villager, you can buy the electrode blueprint. This is one of a few items you need to access the end dimension, but the villagers also have some very unique and custom trades in Inferno, some of which are very worthwhile. The technology in Inferno I thought was pretty fun, and it was interesting to generate power using unconventional means. There is also the Laser IO mod, which I've mentioned before is quickly becoming one of my favourite 1.18 mods. It's awesome. Inferno is a pack where you'll encounter your fair share of challenging boss battles, most of them being the 5 main progression bosses to upgrade the university. However, there's also a heavily tweaked and buffed Ender Dragon. If you've seen my Let's Play, you know that the Ender Dragon gave us some issues. I saw that it's since been nerfed by around 30%, still a very challenging fight from the default vanilla dragon though. You'll still need to make sure that you're well geared for the fight. To do that, you have several options at different tiers. Inferno adds an extra set bonus to a lot of the different armor sets. I opted to go for the Blood Magic Living Armor, but there's a lot of other viable alternatives such as the Quantum Armor from FTBIC. Apotheosis is another mod in the pack here, which allows you to get really crazy with the enchantments on your tools and armor, along with being able to give them socket gems and epic and mythic affixes, which again can get absolutely insane. I did really enjoy playing around with the salvage and reforging tables from Apotheosis. Something unique to Inferno is the custom gate portals, which periodically spawn after you get your tier 1 university. These portals will spawn random mobs and progressively get more difficult as you go through the tiers. Taking on these waves of enemies do provide some nice loot, especially in the early game, and they will also attack your citizens. But I found the system to be easily avoidable by just hiding in a space too small for the portal, and that results in a situation where no mobs can spawn. It's kind of cheesing the system a bit, but I still think the portals are a good addition to the pack overall. And they're also used as part of the boss battles as well to spawn extra mobs. And some of these mobs can be champion mobs, so they get quite ridiculous sometimes. After progressing through all the tiers, your final task is to return to the overworld and unlock the recipe for neutronium, which by the way recently got a new addition, the Threetronium bee. Previously, the only way to get neutronium was through the neutron collector. It's really nice that they added this bee, and even better that it's named after me. But at this stage of the game you must gear up to fight the final boss, the Witherstorm. A necessary component of the fight is the Sword of the Cosmos, made mostly from infinity ingots. These ingots are quite an involved process and make use of some of the FTBIC, Create and some of the other processes and infrastructure you've unlocked. I also made up the lack of materials which could not be obtained from the bees by excavating the end dimension. This was another one of my favourite parts of the pack, setting up ore processing using Create crushers and occultism, and then filtering everything out and bulk smelting to process them down into ingots and gems. Again, there's a few other ways you can go about doing this though. I felt that singularities were actually a very reasonable and appropriate cost in Inferno. Along with the super dense plating, there's also a list of materials you need from the magic mods, but I thought overall the endgame was actually fairly balanced, at least for the material cost. The final boss fight, the Witherstorm, is not something I'm going to spoil too much here, but if you would like to see the full fight, check out the finale episode. That was a lot of fun actually. Keep in mind at the time there was a number of different things we ran into which negatively impacted the fight. Despite these issues and bugs, I still think it was mostly a well-designed battle. Most of the bugs should have been ironed out at this point, at least the ones preventing progression. Plus, I'm not the best at Minecraft combat, so it definitely could have been played better in the first place. Inferno is definitely a unique pack to say the least, and there's lots of other aspects I haven't covered here. I think if you're looking for a modern expert pack with a unique twist, then Inferno will definitely be able to deliver. The Minecolonies is something I feel was implemented well for the most part. It's just it's not really my type of playstyle personally. I still did enjoy the pack as a whole though, as it provided a significant and unique challenge. 200 hours in the nether though is a bit excessive. I'm looking forward to getting back to the overworld. The Lords of Inferno were no match for Threefold this time. Many of you probably know that one of my Discord moderators, Taz, works for FTB and contributed a significant amount to this project. I feel like it's worth mentioning, but it doesn't have any impact on my final opinions of the pack. During my playthrough I encountered quite a few bugs, most of which, to be fair, have been addressed. However, in my opinion, Inferno was released a little bit too early. Many of the issues I think could have been addressed before release with a little bit more testing. I do want to thank Sereth though, the lead developer, and of course Taz, along with the rest of the people who contributed to Inferno. I think I can safely say they provided a really great experience overall. And of course we got such great things as the 3 Tronium Bee. So this also brings us to the end of the journey through the Nether. I hope that you guys enjoyed another fun series and consider joining our Discord if you haven't already. But now that the overworld is no longer in darkness, maybe we can return to where the sun sets over the horizon. Thank you again for watching everyone, I hope to see you again soon.